In this lecture, we're going to store the story in the dialog state. Currently, the dialog state never receives the story. Without the story, we won't be able to update the text or display the choices from the story. Let's open the dialog state. We have one problem with accessing this information. The enterState method does not accept data. This is because the abstract class does not have a parameter for this method. One solution would be to add it as a parameter to the original definition. However, modifying the abstract class means that all other classes must reflect that change. We only want to accept the story from the state. So, what can we do? The solution is to define another method that accepts the story. It's not against the rules to define additional methods in our state. Before defining the method, let's include the namespaces to access the classes we'll need for the state. At the top of the file, add the Unity Engine namespace. This namespace will give us access to the text asset class. Next, add another namespace called inc.runtime. Inc has a set of classes to help us load and use stories. By installing the official Inc package, this namespace becomes available from our project. Time to define the method. At the bottom of the class, define a public method called setStory. In the method's parameters, add the Inc JSON file as a parameter. The last step is to store the story. We should create a variable for storing this information. At the top of the class, define a variable called currentStory. The type will be story. I'm introducing a new class. Technically, the JSON file is a text file. As we learned earlier, the file is mostly gibberish. We could write the code for demystifying the contents, but that would be time-consuming. Luckily, the developers of Inc have curated a class for unwrapping the text. The story class has useful methods for reading the contents of the file. In most cases, you should use this class to help you read Inc files. Let's head back to the method. In the method, set the currentStory variable to a new instance of the story class. The instance accepts the JSON file. Let's pass in the Inc JSON file. Voila! Just like that, our dialog state has access to the story. With the help of the story class, we'll be able to go through the contents easily. Let's call this method from the controller. Open the UI controller file. In the handleInitiateDialog method, we should call the setStory method. However, that's going to pose a problem. To find out why, call the currentState.setStory method with the Inc JSON parameter passed in. After calling this method, we're given an error. If we hover our mouse over the line of code, the editor says that this method does not exist in our class. Mysterious, right? However, things start to make sense when we look at the variable definition. Scrolling to the top of the class, the currentStory variables type is the UI-based class. This class does not have the setStory method. This method is unique to the dialog state class. The editor is looking inside this class for the method, which is why it states that it doesn't exist. It doesn't matter that we updated the variable to a different value. C# always assumes the type is the type assigned during declaration. The question becomes, how do we fix this problem? There's a feature called typecasting to help us address this issue. We can force a variable to temporarily change its type. This feature shouldn't be taken lightly. It's something you should use sparingly. It's perfect for our case. Let's head back to the method. I'm going to wrap the currentState variable with parentheses. By adding the parentheses, code inside will be executed before the method is called. We must perform typecasting before invoking a method. After the currentStory variable, add a keyword called as. The as keyword allows developers to change the type of a variable. In our case, we're going to change the type to the UI dialog state class. After adding this type, the error goes away. Unlike the base class, the dialog class has the setStory method. Therefore, C# is happy. Keep in mind, typecasting only applies to this line of code. It does not affect the rest of the class. Typecasting is temporary. It's time to start updating the UI with the story's contents. In the next lecture, let's try accessing the story's text to display it in the UI.